Assalamualaikum. My name is Noreen Sarbina binti Zuraimi, and today I'm gonna talk about supraventricular tachycardia, which also known as SVT. So before I start, I want you guys to imagine that you guys are relaxing, watching and sitting a television, and then suddenly your heart jumps up from a normal heartbeat to a rapid heartbeat, which is between 150 beat per minute to 250 beat per minute. So obviously at that time you guys will feel shocked and scary, like what is happening, guys? Like why my heart is like this? Like why? And then that is why my topic today is supraventricular tachycardia. Now before we start any further, I'm gonna explain about the normal conduction system of the heart so that we can understand more about the pathophysiology of SVT. Which makes sense, which is supra means from above, ventricular is the ventricle, and tachycardia is fast heart rate, which is more than 100 beat per minute. So now before we start any further, I'm gonna explain about the normal conduction system of the heart so that we can understand more about the pathophysiology of SVT. In normal conduction system of the heart, there are 5 components that we need to know. The normal conduction system consists of the following component, which is sinoatrial node, or SA node, which is located in the right atrium near the entrance of the superior vena cava. So, this is the natural pacemaker of the heart, and it initiates all the heartbeat and determines the heart rate. So, electrical impulse from SA node will spread to both atria and stimulate them to contract. Next component is the atrioventricular node or AV node. So, this AV node is located on the other side of the right atrium near the AV valve. So, the AV node serves as the gateway to the ventricle. It delays the passage of the electrical impulse to the ventricle. This delay to ensure that the atria have ejected all the blood into the ventricle before the ventricle contract. So, the AV node receives signal and passes the signal to the bundle of his, which is divided into left and right bundle branch. So, both of it conduct the impulse toward the apex of the heart. Then, the signal then pass to the next component, which is the Purkinje fiber, and turning upwards, spreading to the ventricular myocardium. The electrical activity can be recorded in a form of ECG. ECG is a composite reading of the all axial potential produced by the node and the cell of myocardium. So each wave of the segment in the ECG corresponds to a certain event of the cardiac electrical cycle. So let's look at what happened during a single beat at the heart and how this event depicted on an ECG. In a normal heart, each begins at the right atrium with an axial potential signal from SA node, which is the natural pacemaker. So, the signal will spread across both atria and contract, causing the muscle to depolarize and contract inducing a phase called atrial systole. So, on the ECG, the atrial repolarization is represented by the P wave. So, the period conduction that follow atrial systole and precede the contraction of the ventricle is depicted on the ECG by the PR segment. A flat line follows the P wave when the signal leaves the atria and it enters ventricle via the atrioventricular, or also known as AV node, which is located in the interatrial septum. It enters bundle of his branches and spread through the bundle branch and the large diameter Purkinje fiber along the ventricle wall. As the signal spread through the ventricle, the contractile fiber depolarize and contract very rapidly, inducing ventricular systole. And in the ECG, there is QRS complex. QRS complex represents the rapid ventricular depolarization, and at the same time, atrial repolarization occur at this time. So, finally, as the signal pass out of the ventricular wall start to relax and recover a stage we describe as ventricular diastole, which is the dome-shaped T wave on the ECG marked as ventricular repolarization. So, on the ECG, ST segment depicts the period when the ventricles are depolarized, and the QT interval represents at the time taken for both depolarization and repolarization of the ventricle to occur. Most of the cases of supraventricular tachycardia is caused by the electrical signal re-entering the atria from the ventricle. Once the signal goes back in the atria, it travels back through the AV node, then through the ventricle again, and causes another ventricular contraction. This causes self-perpetuating electrical loop without an endpoint. In result, in a fast, narrow, complex tachycardia can be seen in the ECG. Clip from the pathophysiology of the supraventricular tachycardia, the patient will be having rapid heartbeat. And to be more confirmed with the diagnosis, we can detect the disease by looking at their ECG. So there are a few criteria that we can look in the ECG whether the patient have SVT or not. So now I'm gonna explain the criteria of SVT in an ECG. So the criteria ECG of SVT is firstly no P wave, second regular rhythm, third fast heart rate, and lastly narrow QRS complex. From the criteria, now we can interpret the 12-lead ECG to identify whether the ECG is SVT or not. Now, from the ECG, we can interpret this ECG by using the 10 step. So, the first step is looking at the AVR lead. Should look at the AVR either it is negative or not, because if the AVR is not negative, we cannot proceed to interpret the ECG. So as you can see in this ECG, the AVR is negative. We look at the PR interval. So as you can see here, there is no PR interval there since there is no P wave. So the next step is we look at the QRS complex. So in this ECG, based on lead 2, we could see that the ECG have narrow QRS complex. And the next step is we have to look at the ST segment. So based on this ECG, all of the ST segment on every lead is normal ST segment, and there is no abnormality in the ST segment in this ECG. And the next step is we have to look at the QT interval. So in this ECG, the QT interval is normal. And lastly, the last step is we have to look at the T wave. So the T wave in all lead is normal, only at AVR there is deflection, V1 is negative T inversion, and at lead 3 there is no T wave, and basically mostly the lead have normal T wave. And that's all for the interpretation of ECG. So that's all for the topic of supraventricular tachycardia. I hope you guys enjoy and understand from this video. That's all for me. With that, I thank you.